Welcome back to another awesome episode of Rankable. I can't even begin to express how excited I am. One of my favorite people is joining me. Today I'm joined by Areej AbuAli. Areej, so what doesn't she do? She's the founder of Women in Tech SEO. She's an SEO consultant. She's the head of SEO at Papier. Been doing this for 8+ years, in-house, agency, all around the bend. And one thing that I love about Areej is she's always advancing diversity. She actually won an award for diversity and inclusion in search marketing. She does conference speaking at SMX and MozCon and Brighton SEO, like wherever you name it. And she's a mom. So she and I are like our babies were born within a few months. Thank you so much for joining me today, Areej. How you doing?
Yeah, I'm good. Thank you for having me. I don't normally reach out to people and ask them to have me on their podcast, but I reached out to you because you are my favorite host ever. And I just really enjoy getting to have a conversation with you.
Oh my gosh, it's been too long, and we have so much in common despite being so different. We both are so passionate about our industry and just making it a better place and improving it. You've built this amazing community. So many of the women that I've had on Rankable are active members in Women in Tech SEO. But today I want to talk about something that's completely different, which is your in-house role. And some of the challenges that SEOs face when working in-house that's so different than many of the SEO roles. So I just want to I want to hear you talk. I'm tired of talking. I want to know, dive into in-house. So first off, what do people misunderstand about in-house SEO the most?
I remember when I was agency side, I was there for a little bit over 5 years, and I wanted to make the move to in-house, and I asked a lot of folks for advice. And one of the things that was, a lot of people seem to think it's so much easier than working agency side for some reason. And a lot of them seem to feel like in-house, you don't actually get much work done. It's more a lot of meetings, a lot of stakeholder discussions, and so forth. That was not my experience in the 2 in-house roles I've had. Quite the opposite, actually. Like, I thought there was a lot about it that was much more challenging than it being agency side. And I thought there was a lot of time spent on execution. So yeah, I think that's a little bit of a misconception there that people tend to have about in-house.
And to that point, and I've experienced that a little as well. It's not always just the bureaucracy. It's just knowing just one specific website that you become obsessed about and you really perfect. And so it's like all those nuances. It's almost like raising a kid. It's like whatever works for everyone else doesn't necessarily work just for you. You kind of have to figure it out yourself, right?
Yeah, I think there's like advantages and disadvantages to that. I mean, people who are new to SEO, I tend to tell them go agency side, because then you get this experience of like working across like a large number of websites and industries and so forth. But then once you move in-house, you actually get this, you're able to really dive deep into that one website and kind of dissect it and analyze it and know it inside out. And there's just a lot that can come out of that, as opposed to on your agency side, and you tend to just kind of just brush the surface of some websites that you work with.
Absolutely. And you get more insight in terms of what the internal goals are, because you're working for all these different stakeholders very intimately. But for you, what's the biggest challenge that you're facing in your role right now, and how are you actually tackling it?
Yeah, I think this will probably be something that's relatable for a lot of folks, but when you're in-house, you're kind of short on resources. That tends to be the case. So I'm in my usual go-to would have been struggling to, for example, get developers to work on my recommendations. But actually in my current in-house role, it's the opposite, because I happen to sit in the tech team, which is very rare, but which is amazing. So what's happening is that I'm short on content resources. So, it's never like the grass isn't necessarily greener on the other side. But a lot of it really reflects on like where you're sat within the team, and priorities that other teams seem to have. So if, for example, tons of the opportunities that you've identified fall under a certain team and you don't have enough resources there, that tends to be a challenge. I think, SEO in general is just very, very cross-functional. We tend to to put out a lot of recommendations, but then we depend on a lot of other experts to kind of execute and get a lot of that work done, which kind of puts us in this difficult position of having to, fight for some of that resource.
Oh, absolutely. You really do have to have great relationships with so many different people in the organization. So specifically for content, how are you kind of going at it? Are you taking the initiative to kind of make the business case for more content? Are you just like kind of paring down your requests and just being like, okay, that's not the priority right now? What's your mindset?
I think it's a mix of both. So I try to get a good understanding behind what their priorities are and what they're focused on. And then I try to see whether I can, slip some of my recommendations within that, because then, it's like it's a win-win for everyone. So it's like, let's say, for example, they're focused on producing content for these specific products within that quarter, then that also could become my focus. And I could, have recommendations that are specifically related to that. I also have a really good understanding behind like their calendar and their seasonality and what matters for them, and how far in advance do they want to produce the content and so forth. And so again, I can go in and I can like tap in their calendar and have recommendations alongside the work, but also just giving them more support and help. So not simply saying we need more content about like X topic, but actually, doing some of that research and identifying some of the topics that could be helpful and backing a lot of it with data just makes their job much easier, as opposed to just saying, could you please write us content about like topic X?
Yeah, internal communications makes so much sense, and I think being empathetic to what their roles and their goals as their job are is a really smart way to go about it. How did you like when you first entered your role? Were you clued into their like editorial calendars, or did you have to be proactive? Like, how would you recommend other in-house SEOs kind of develop that relationship and get that information?
Yeah, no, you need to be super proactive for sure. I think, anyone new who comes in specifically in an in-house role, like the majority of in-house SEO teams are not that big. You usually have, quite a small team in the majority of organizations. So you need to come in and then you need to kind of introduce yourself. You need to meet different stakeholders. If there are people that you're going to work with a lot, like make sure you have frequent touch-ins, whether that's like every 2 weeks or once a month or so forth. Have shared Slack channels together where you can kind of share some of the work, and just kind of loop them in about, what your goals are and what your KPIs are and what you're being measured against, and then understand what they're being measured against. And I'm sure you will find that, there's probably like similarities there, what you're being measured on and what they're being measured on. So yeah, being proactive is super important. And I think just that education piece as well of, well, what is SEO and why is SEO important? And why does it not only matter to me, but why does it matter to you? And why does it matter to the business as a whole? With the content team specifically, I think like this idea of SEO content is definitely an idea that we all need to like slowly remove from our vocab, because if we're all aligned on this idea that, well, this content that we're producing is actually so helpful for our users and readers as a whole, then they will start looking at it in a different way, as opposed to, oh, this is just something that the SEO team need for their checklist.
It's obviously very apropos to what's going on in the SEO world. This episode we actually recorded last week, but we, the previous week we just heard about this helpful content update, and it could be a big nothing burger, but it could flip the whole SEO world upside down, like Panda did 10 plus years ago. What's your opinion, or what are your predictions or opinion of what's going to happen with this update, Areej? Like, do you have any strong opinions about the helpful content update?
I'm really excited about it. I think a lot of people feel excited about it. I think it's probably a core update, but they've just renamed it to make us feel better. Where, core update by itself sounds a bit scary, but then when you know what it's targeting and what it's focusing on, that makes it feel more. And also, it's kind of like aligned with a lot of what we've been recommending for several years now. So there's nothing about it that kind of scares us or puts us off. The complete opposite, which is hopefully this can kind of give support that we do need more resource and we need more support when it comes to things like on-page and content. I'm excited about it. I don't know whether it's going to be It's probably going to be one of those things where we're going to have several iterations. So potentially the first iteration is going to be one of those where, super foundational, very fundamental, like tackles the spam of the spam, which we would expect it to. And then moving forward, like the future iterations will probably be a little bit more aggressive in terms of targeting things that we wouldn't have potentially expected to target.
I feel like that perspective makes a lot of sense. A lot of people kind of support that as well. As like, if you're doing content for the user, if you're producing good SEO, then you shouldn't be hurt. I think the big fear for SEOs who, not necessarily rationally freak out about it, but they get upset is the idea of, what if Google gets it wrong? Like, what if, like, can we trust Google to not inadvertently penalize people who are doing content in SEO for the user and doing it well,
Yeah, I think the tricky bit as well is it's so dependent on the website type, where, for example, if you work on an aggregator or marketplace type of website, like some of your templates, there's only so much content that's going to be there. Like, that your users are there to search. Like, I used to work for Zoopla, who are similar to Zillow in the US. And so, the majority of it, people write in like a specific town or a postcode, and then they just want to see listings of houses. So it's like, well, how much content makes sense from a reader or user perspective? Like, we don't want to have content just for the sake of making Google happy, which is essentially what Google is telling us. Whereas you have other websites, which are more like informational website, publications, news, and so forth. Those are more likely to be impacted. So I think it's with the type of websites like, marketplace or e-commerce or so forth, where it's like, well, how much content is good content and how much content makes sense? Like, that's the bit that some people seem to be struggling to understand at the moment.
Yeah, we're gonna be keeping our eyes peeled to see just what happens, because a lot of people can't ultimately predict it. I'm curious. Okay, I'm gonna put this out there, and I know you have a lot of strong views in our industry. What's one thing about SEO that almost no one agrees with you about?
Oh my God, that's such a tough question. I think for the longest time ever, I used to go around saying, technical SEO is your backbone, it's your foundation, you need to get it right. And that's something that everyone agreed with. But over time, to be honest, for me, it's just starting to really become content. And I think, even if you have it's so dependent on the website that you're working on, but there is only so much that fixing or having good technical SEO is going to do for you. I've seen some websites which are extremely messy but have very, very good content that seem to rank really, really well. So yeah, it's becoming, I feel like I'm kind of contradicting what I used to say before, where I used to go into any client and be like, oh my God, technical SEO is your backbone. Focus on that. Spend 30% of this year doing that before you even start considering like having proper on-page and content. And now it's a little bit like, no, you know what? I think actually we should really look at your content strategy. We should really look at what you're going after. Like, that should be our priority. With, anything super broken can be done in parallel.
Okay, so we should keep our eyes peeled for your next Slack community, Women in Content Strategy.
No, can you imagine? That would be really funny.
I'd sign up, but I'm on the outside looking at it. It's funny. You hear such great things about the community and then totally respect it. But as a guy, I'm just like, okay, it's not for me. I get it, but it sounds so good. So going back to in-house, tell me a little bit more about some of your relationships with different departments. Like, how do you help them? How do they help you? How do you build those relationships?
Yeah, I think being in-house, like, you're so fortunate as an SEO because you pretty much work with every single team out there. So now that I'm e-commerce, I work a lot with teams like our visual merchandising team and our trading team and our operations team. And it's just, there's so much you can learn from working with these different teams. I do feel like I'm a little bit of an extension to some of these teams, specifically in terms of kind of providing that guidance of, yep, we can do this, or no, this would be problematic from an organic perspective. I work really closely with the paid team as well, purely from the perspective of they have so much data that as SEOs we can benefit from. So we tend to have like monthly catch-ups and an understanding behind how their performance is changing on a year-on-year perspective compared to organic. And it's really achieving this balance, right? Because we'd both be doing our job better if we can kind of decrease spent on paid, but then rely more on organic and just kind of balance each other out. So with the tech team, normally, like in other roles where I kind of sat outside on the marketing side, I probably spend a lot of time kind of trying to liaise with them and work with them, prioritize things. But right now, like I'm in such an advantage where, because I sit within tech, so I get to attend their stand-ups and I get to attend retro and I get to kind of feed in directly within tickets and prioritization. So I found that very, very helpful.
That's fun. It is so funny about how, you get deeper and deeper embedded in tech and then realizing the importance of content. You still need to have those relationships. And I totally agree with you about, having the paid team kind of as a great sounding board for SEO and content. And being in e-commerce, I am curious about the seasonality of your job, especially with Black Friday. We're a few months away from that. Does your communication increase from an SEO perspective as you get closer to those events?
Yeah, seasonality. I've definitely experienced it the most working in e-commerce, and add to that the layer of the pandemic and what that's done as well in terms of forecasting and in terms of trying to understand year-on-year change and so forth. We are a purely online company, so we do not have any physical stores, which is also something that we need to factor in when it comes to pandemic and how it's changed the consumers in general. So yeah, I think that's definitely something we tend to plan a lot of it like on a quarterly basis. So this quarter, Q3, we would already have planned from the beginning of it. Q4 would have been planned and so forth. And it's something that also needs to be taken into account. So the paid team are very, very good at always sending us updated like trends. So search trends and how those have changed on a year-on-year perspective, but also like on a year on, 2 year on year on 3 year compared to how things were pre-pandemic as well.
Well, that's the whole thing, right? Is like data, not that it goes out the window, but like looking year over year, literally for the last 3 years is so difficult because
100%,
the market conditions are so nuts. Do you have any, I'm not going to ask you for a prediction for the holiday season, but do you have any sort of trends or instincts? Like okay, I lied. I'm going to ask you a prediction. What direction do you anticipate consumer behavior from an SEO perspective?
I think it's really, really unfair to forecast based on the market last year or the year before. Like even last year in the UK, we still had lockdown happen around Christmas. The year before, there was like a very, very strict lockdown. So what was happening is a lot of people were relying on, using online websites for gifting and so forth. Whereas this year, fingers crossed, touch wood, it's going to be, everything will be much, much more open and people will have the luxury of doing a lot of their gifting beforehand. And so you will see that return of purchasing things in physical stores. So I think no question about it. Like when it comes to search trends and specifically in the gifting market with the holidays, we will definitely see a downward trend when it comes to purchasing things online.
I agree. I think it's going to be interesting too, though. One factor that could throw things off is the supply chain issues, just in terms of like how long can you wait to get your deal in the actual store versus like are people, so many of us are procrastinators with buying, but like are people actually going to buy ahead of time? Like, do you wait till last minute to buy your gifts, or are you?
I'm a little bit organized, but I think when it comes to gifting, I am a little bit of a last minute person. But to be honest, supply chain, like it's seriously affecting like e-commerce websites as well. Like you can see that a lot there. And I know a lot of websites, for example, who have dropped this idea of next day delivery and so forth, because they are struggling also to meet these demands.
I can imagine that comes up in the Women in Tech SEO community and on the Slack channels, just talking about like structured data and getting your, out of stock, correct and fulfillment correct and having that all on the tech side implemented properly.
Yeah, definitely. We have a whole channel just for it that kind of focuses on that. And, it's something that I learned a lot of it working in e-commerce. Like it wasn't something that I used to pay too much attention to, but then this understanding of our different templates, our detail pages and our listing pages and what kind of schema we should host on those. And most recently as well with the new videos insights that we have on Search Console. So this concept of something that was probably always a problem, but now feels like a problem because it's being reported. So even, video schema and so forth. So yeah, there's definitely a lot there that you can do to just help yourself appear better and more in the SERPs.
Absolutely, you got to be on top of it. Google's giving you more tools. I do want to bring it back to in-house. In your role in-house, working with the different departments we keep talking about, how do you manage up at your role when you get up to those executive levels that have different, goals than your immediate goal? Obviously, your goals are their goals, but how do you manage up with them?
Yeah, I think a lot of it, like I was one of the first SEOs to join my current company. And so I spent a lot of time initially just deep diving into, well, what will I actually report on? What should my benchmark be? And so forth. And I had a lot of conversations where I kind of got a good understanding behind what the business KPIs were. And then from that, I produced, okay, so these are going to be our SEO KPIs. And they were purely produced completely from our business objectives. And I think that makes sense then, because then it feels like everyone's speaking the same language. And so, if organic revenue and then organic revenue year on year, organic revenue season on season, is what is being reported, then what I need to do is, I need to show, okay, what is the percentage of share that organic have from that total? And so your aim at the end of the day is to have that going up and up and up. And I tend to also do like it's almost like SEO versus PPC type of percentage of share, where you can see, how that changes over time. And, it's good news for everyone, right? Because if our organic share is growing and our paid share is going down, then that's perfect, because it means we're spending less and we're getting more free traffic. So yeah, I think just spending some time really understanding the business objectives, and then from that, getting out, okay, so these are going to be our objectives from an organic perspective. And sharing those wide and just asking for a lot of feedback. Like I remember I was really nervous the first monthly SEO report I sent out. And I was like, please give me feedback, because if this isn't helpful, or if this is something that you will simply like skim and skip, then there's no point, spending time and energy doing it. So just, don't be afraid to ask for feedback and take a lot of it on board and keep iterating and keep changing each time.
I love that. You gotta remove the ego. It's hard, it's something for some people. It's hard to like remove the ego from the process, but like you keep saying, it's like we're all on the same team, and we're all, one of us wins, we all win. Finally, and so many good conversations. I could talk to you for hours about all this stuff, but obviously iPullRank is an agency. We work with a lot of enterprises. What advice would you give to someone in-house who's working with an SEO agency, that they procured?
Oh, I love that. I spent a lot of time during my time at Zoopla, getting sign off for an agency and then working with an agency. And that was one of the coolest projects I ever worked on. And you have to, they need to be your team. Like they need to be part of the team, and you need to make sure that you make them feel like they're part of the team, and you need to loop them in all the conversations. And something I always did when I was in-house was this idea of, I used to tell the entire marketing department, this is not the SEO agency. This is our marketing agency. So this agency isn't just for SEO. It's also for PR. It's also for, it's also for our paid team. It's also it's something that, and so when you get sign off on projects, or when you get an agreement, you need to make sure that you have representatives across the whole department kind of signing stuff off. Because if you go ahead and try to do your own thing with them, what might happen is that you end up like stepping on a lot of different toes in-house. And then it just, it creates these problems potentially between the agency and other folks within in-house. So make them part of the team, keep them updated with what's happening, share your goals and objectives with them, ask them for help, provide them with a lot of feedback, but also like they're not just for you. They're not just your agency as SEO. They're your entire department or your entire team's agency.
It makes so much sense. It's like you are the point of contact, but to your point, it's like you treat them like another in-house employee. And if you do the same way, the communication, the feedback, all of that, and that if you win, they win. If they win, you win. It all makes so much sense. And yet it's so easy to get wrong, like just to, have those mishaps. But when you have that great relationship, then, you and the agency can basically do anything together.
Yeah, 100%. I really enjoyed working with my agency. And I think that was such a learning for me as well, because I'd never I'd never put the time and effort to convince, an in-house department to get an agency on board, and then have to make sure that the agency fits in. And it was a huge learning, but also I learned so much from them, right? As having them as my agency. So yeah.
I love that. Okay. Are you ready for our final segment? This is going to be our rapid fire rankings. I'm going to give you, series of quick questions. Just give me like the first thing that comes to your mind. It's all about SEO, all stuff you know inside and out. Okay. We're going to do this. Set the clock. Here we go. Rank your best SEO marketing or marketing win.
Oh, I'm already stuck. Oh, sorry. It's the pressure of having to answer quickly. Okay. Say it again.
Okay, rank your best SEO or marketing win.
We de-indexed about 70% of our website once, which was insane, but actually we got massive gains from it.
Oh, that's amazing. Okay, rank your top 3 SEO tools.
Screaming Frog, Sitebulb, Search Console.
Okay, perfect. Rank your best SEO trick or tactic.
Oh, to be honest, like spending a whole lot of time on the website, never mind the tools, like just spending time on the website, going through the navigation, just treating it as a user. This is the first thing you should do on any new website that you work with.
I love that advice. Rank what you love most about SEO.
I don't know, always keeps you on your toes, like it's always changing, which is really, really fun. So yeah, it never feels boring.
Never gets boring. Rank your best learning SEO resource.
Women in Tech SEO Slack community. No question about it. I literally just go through, I spend like questions and answers. I just read them and I feel like I'm learning so much.
Rude. I can't participate, but you heard it, women. Go check it out. Okay, this is the worst one. Okay. And you're going to leave people out, but that's okay. Rank the top 1 to 3 SEOs or marketers that you most look up to.
Oh, Aleda. Hannah Smith, so much love for her. Roxana Stingu, she is just a brilliant technical SEO and human. They're all brilliant. I was reading Hannah's newsletter recently, and every single one is just so killer. Okay, and finally, rank your number 1 cause or charity that you want to promote. Women in Tech SEO. Thank you. You've already given it so much love. But yeah, if there are any women who have not come across it, please do join us. Completely free. You can find all of our resources and groups on womenintechseo.com.
Amazing. Areej, thank you so much for joining me. It's always a pleasure. Your wealth of knowledge, you are an amazing part of our community, making it better every day. I appreciate you. If people want to find you online, where do you hang out? Where's the best place?
I spend far too much time on Twitter. I shouldn't. Areej _AbuAli. And yeah, you can find me on LinkedIn and on the Women in Tech SEO Slack. And yeah. There you go. We'll have links in the description, but thank you so much for joining me. I really appreciate it. Yeah, thank you for having me. Absolutely. My name is Garrett Sussman. This has been the Rankable podcast for iPullRank. We will catch you next week. Signing off.